Test. 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 Test.
Non, ils ont déjà tout testé. Dernière avec Linéa et ça va juste.
And Jisoo, the architect also. Engagement here. Yeah, from WRI.
Ah, nice to meet
But you're an architect by training. Who's architects here?
No, none of us. None of us.
So we're finally here. Yeah.
check the light if you don't mind. Because if I'm there and I cannot leave, it's...
Resolve. No?
Algebra today. Open your books. You start with algebra. Oh, I think it's good.
Bonjour. Good morning. Let's try to get started. I know everybody's excited. This is the first Buildings Forum, but let's try to get started. And I would like to invite the first panel to come to the stage.
Hi, Mubarak.
Ah, nice, Leah. Good to see you finally. I've heard so many things. The team loves you. No, my pleasure.
Hi, Mubarak. Nice to meet you. Thank you. Oh, good. Thank you.
It's a privilege of being speaker.
The French are improving because now we don't have plastic bottles in conferences. Maybe after
You like water?
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Where now plastic is banned.
Single use as well.
Doesn't matter how to carry the water along with the water comes from. Congress in China says, okay, you're taking the water from a place which is 20 kilometers from my home in Venice. It's not just the plastic, it's also the CO2 for carrying the water there.
Good morning, everyone. Please have a seat. We'll get started. Bonjour à toutes et tous. This is the correct one, right?
That's good.
Welcome, everyone. I will not moderate in French, though I am tempted to, but that will extend the session probably with another 1.5 hours. I'm really happy to see so many of our colleagues and representatives of countries and cities here in the room at this first Buildings and Climate Forum. An extremely important forum if we all want to, if we're serious and if we all want to get and keep Paris alive. As we all know, buildings are crucial for decarbonizing this world, and actually they're a prime source of GHGs in cities. My name is Rogier van den Berg. Roger is easier internationally. I'm from the Netherlands. I'm leading the WRI Ross Center for Sustainable Cities from World Resources Institute. And I'm really happy to have a discussion today around multi-level governance. I think this is a crucial component of being effective in setting policies at the national level, but also, accelerate implementation and create markets at the local level. I don't know who here in the audience was at COP in Dubai. So I was. So yeah, quite a few, right? So at COP, there was a great initiative supported by 72 countries, which is called CHAMP, the Coalition for High Ambition Multi-Level Partnerships. And it's a very important initiative to drive and to accelerate the collaboration between local authorities, cities and subnationals, and the national authorities. And I think today we will hear a lot of examples on, how cities overcome hurdles for decarbonizing buildings, but also what they expect, and from the other side, what national authorities expect from cities to kind of go fast forward, because there's no time to lose. I have the honor to ask to the stage for the opening remarks Aziza Akmouch, who is head of the division of cities at OECD. And I'm super happy that you're here. You're just flying in from, I think you were yesterday still in Morocco. So thank you very much for being here. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Rogier, and really thrilled to be here to share with you some of the main takeaways that have come out of a Herculean piece of work, I have to say, that we are completing with the Ministry of Ecological Transition of France, alongside a number of partners that I see in the room, from UNEP to Global ABC, UN Habitat, and PIB, to basically look at the types of policies that have been set up in a range of countries. We've been surveying 28 countries, mainly from OECD and emerging economies, but also from the South. We have Ivory Coast, for example, in the sample of the South, to look at the types of policies that they've put in place, or the types of objectives that they're setting up to accelerate this decarbonization agenda in buildings. And I don't need to recall the rationale for doing this type of work. Many of you have heard in the opening plenary the main figures that guide our collective, intelligence in this field of buildings, the fact that buildings actually account for 40% of energy-related CO2 emissions. There's a number of things that have also been said in terms of the co-benefits. Investing in buildings is actually generating jobs. For every millions of, for every euro invested in energy efficiency in buildings in the Americas, for example, there are about 30 jobs that are created. We've also at the OECD correlated that decarbonization agenda with very concrete outcomes in terms of reducing energy poverty. And I don't need to mention also the public expenditures related to health that are basically saved through decarbonizing our buildings, about 190 billion euros in the European Union only every year. So the rationale and the co-benefits are quite crystal clear. And the fact that this is also a shared responsibility has been mentioned a number of times, including in Rogier's remark, because we know there's a huge diversity of situations across countries, but also within countries, in terms of the building stock, in terms of the local climate conditions, but also in terms of cities' capacity to respond to that challenge. And what we see in the very preliminary findings of that survey, as I said, across 28 countries, that you can access if you Google decarbonizing buildings OECD, you'll find our landing webpage, and you can download these policy highlights, but also the 28 country-specific profiles that have come out of that global inventory. We see a number of interesting takeaways that I'll summarize very briefly. The first one relates to that fragmentation and interministerial prerogative. We see that in 90% actually of the sample, there are at least 3 different ministries that have at central government level core competencies related to the decarbonization agenda for buildings. We see that more than half of these countries have actually set up building commitments as part of their NDCs. We see that about half of these countries have set up very concrete targets to phase out fossil fuels in terms of heating and cooling in the buildings. We see that over half have put, and that's an interesting angle, stricter regulations for public buildings than they have for private buildings. And I think that's this leading by example from the public angle side. And we see, and that's the last takeaway that I find extremely interesting going forward, that over 60% of the sample do not have a monitoring and evaluation framework in place to actually take stock of the performance, but most importantly, track progress over time. And I think these insights are really recalling the importance of public policy going forward, and that shared responsibility across levels of government. I'll just wrap up for the 4 minutes I have with 2 main messages going forward. The first one is that we see in the sample that countries are actually increasingly focusing on embodied carbon as part of their strategies, meaning that they're looking more and more at the emissions from building materials, but also they're looking at the circularity dimension, recycling and using materials. We have about 11-12% of the sample that currently focuses on that, and more than 45% actually project to do so in the coming years. And this is an interesting piece of news. And we see, and that's the final point I just wanted to provide in this helicopter view, that the two main bottlenecks that actually come as basically hindering the capacity of governments to accelerate their decarbonization agenda relate to the costs upfront, in particular for the renovation, and that raises the issue of social acceptance and the just transition that is inherent also to that agenda, because we know this has distributional effects that are varying across categories of groups and places. And the second main bottleneck that was put forward is the lack or insufficient or inconsistent regulatory frameworks within and across countries to accelerate that renovation wave. So just a sample of what has come out of this work. There's still more to do, and we're planning to release together with the French Ministry of Ecological Transition the final report around the summer. Thank you very much, and I look forward to the discussion today.
Thank you very much, Aziza, and especially these last two messages, one on the embodied carbon component, pardon me, and the upfront cost and the regulatory framework. We have an excellent panel here, and I would like the third panelist, Andy, maybe you can join the first panel to have a more even balance between the two panels. Just want to do a little bit of an interactive part here. Maybe you can go to Slido and answer this question for me. And I'm very curious what kind of a word cloud or kind of answers we will generate here. So what resources or initiatives for building decarbonization have worked well in your local context? Yes? Are we getting it? There we come. Embodied carbon. Yesterday we were in a session with quite a few friends that I see here in the audience. There's a lot of discussion, I think, the importance of embodied carbon, but the difficulty for politicians to actually bring this to the front in a way that they are comfortable with. You see microgrids, training and staff, public-private partnerships, whole life cycle carbon accounting, and enforcement, not important, unimportant. Centers of excellence, well, I'm not going to read it all. Certification for front runners, great. Community-led initiatives, building codes. This is a kind of a snapshot probably of the discussion points that we will hear revolve in the discussion today. And then before we go to the panel, just a quick check on where you're sitting, right? So who is with the national authorities or the national government here? Please raise your hand. It's very helpful for us to understand who's in the. Who is with the local authorities? Who is with international organization? Who is, that's very good, eh? So who is with the private sector?
Yeah, that's the.
And who is with something else? Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Gives us a clear overview. I want to give the floor to Mr. Mubarak Mukaila, who is the head of climate department and coordinator of CRC in Lomé, Togo. And the first question comes to you. How do you see the role of local governments in Lomé, driving sustainable development and resilience efforts? And what opportunities do you consider local governments to garner in spearheading net zero efforts and building decarbonization action?
Thank you very much for inviting me and giving me the floor on this. It's actually very interesting to see how in the context of the West African region, it is important to see decarbonization. When you take when you do a mapping of decarbonization in the world, Africa is the place where you can actually build and develop development strategies around decarbonization. Every sector, in every possible sector, you can have a decarbonization strategy. And one of the core elements that at the West African Development Bank we built into our strategy is how we can interact in the energy transition with decarbonization in other sectors. It's a good timing that many countries in the West African region have discovered that they have a lot of fossil fuel resources, and they want to incorporate that in their development strategies. But yet we push them to have decarbonization in other sectors. The very good example is that when you take a country like Senegal, for example, they have discovered oil, and they want to develop a massive energy sector with the fossil fuel. But then what we tell them is that, yes, we will continue supporting Senegal in developing energy with some kind of fossil fuel, because there is also a mix that we are encouraging them to have. But then in other sectors like transports, construction, buildings, and infrastructure, we will like to see a huge decarbonization within your development strategy. So what we are doing is that we're making sure that while they're developing the energy sector, they're also having instruments that support decarbonization. So the West African Development Bank has developed a new strategy in which 25% of the resources are oriented to sustainable development. And we have some elements, especially in the building sector, that we incorporate in the analysis, the assessment that we do. So we integrate systematically the IFC EDGE certification in the constructions that we do. We also aim to push all the new constructions that we have into developing renewable energy and energy efficiency solutions. We have a strong component of carbon credits, carbon emissions, emission reduction solutions that we provide, where we push for energy reduction, emission reduction, and efficient energy, and where we can give equity as a upfront fee to the project developer, because that's also one of the huge barriers in the development of projects. So we aim to build on the carbon emission reduction certificates and then give equity solutions to the project developers. There are a couple of areas where you have a lot of support that they need. Like I said, there's a high upfront cost, especially because of the technology development. So we provide equity, like I said. There's also a huge lack of awareness and education. So capacity building, capacity enhancement is something that we also really much support. With local communities and local governments, there is a big gap on institutional framework arrangement. And we also support the countries to have the legal arrangements to enable local community and local governments to be able to mobilize resources, because right now it's very difficult to have that. You have a city like the city of Lomé, where we support in building carbon emission solutions, but unfortunately they don't have the necessary capacity to do that. So we support also cities and communities to develop technical capacities to be able to incorporate those aspects into the project development, which is something really challenging right now. And like I said, it's actually paramount in our region to have solutions adapted to local community and local governments, because right now there is a huge gap between the understanding and the integration between the central governments and the local government. So we are trying to build a bridge between those two stakeholders to make sure that they speak to each other to enable necessary capacity. And one of the core issues that we face is also the institutional arrangement, the legal capacity of the lender, the person that lends the money, which most of the time in the context of Africa, because of political issues, the two do not speak to each other. The local governments and the central government don't speak to each other. So in the places, in the areas where you have, for example, an opposition leader as the mayor, they do not strictly speak to the central government, which does not allow them to mobilize resources. So there is a bridge that solutions that instruments that we try to develop, guarantee instruments, equity instruments that we try to develop to make sure that those two institutions can talk to each other. So there is a huge development that we also support local governments with on developing the local development plans to incorporate low emission strategies around those plans. And there is we are starting to see that there is a shift between governments that are just working on development strategies and those who want to really incorporate low emission strategies in their development plans. Thank you.
Wow, thank you very much. Thanks a lot. Very rich remarks, already enough to have a large conversation around, but we have a lot of speakers. So, and we have our next speaker is from Venice. And just to continue to keep it a bit interactive, I just want to understand who of you has been visiting Venice in your life? Well,
More than one half.
Exactly. So welcome Pier Paolo Campostrini, Director General of Corilla and Scientific Advisor to VSF in Venice. Aziza talked about renovation. We hear about retrofit, but you are dealing with preservation, right?
Yes.
And so question two, how do you deal in the pearl that Venice is with kind of sustainable practices and decarbonizing the built environment?
Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you very much for this question, which is very appropriate. You may see also for those of which were never been in Venice, how Venice is a city quite particular, but not so much if you think about the Italian, European cities, which have been built in their core in the Middle Age and then developed. So it is just a number of all the territory of Venice is tutelated for its cultural heritage. And so it's not just a single building. We have to consider the city and also for the landscape issues, which is also important. You may see in the picture which have been put in the last corner, the right corner, there is how we hide the elements for conditioning, the air conditioning, because we need also to maintain the landscape, not only the functionality. And it is actually a matter of I just taken one example to make it shorter, exactly, because otherwise we have the possibility to renovate one building, which was for a previous industry for bricks production. There was ported in an apartment, normal apartment, but in a special city, as you may see there. And so we cannot use the same technique that are used elsewhere. We cannot go into technical details, of course, but the most important thing to understand is for the energy, normally you have to insulate the walls, and you cannot put the insulation on the walls outside. Otherwise, you change the face of the building. So you have to maintain what is its cultural heritage. Actually, it is possible, is what we did there, one architect did there, and with some using also some material which should be appropriate for the context. So we cannot use plastic in a way in that kind of buildings. And so we use the wood, but also the problem of flooding. You may know that we had some issues concerning flooding in Venice, or in any case, the relationship with the water. We have also to not to make higher the risks which are subject to the buildings in order to be more resilient, as we told also in the plenary. So we use also some particular material of insulation, glass, which we were in Murano, so we use modern cellular glass for insulation, for waterproof insulation. I mean, to be very, very brief, I would say that I would like to share with you these messages, which are simple. One, we have to consider the cultural heritage, especially not only in Europe, but I believe anywhere. There is the buildings have an history, and a moment they share with the people. So we cannot disregard this part. Also because cultural heritage safeguarding and building decarbonization are not conflicting values. And we are going to approve a directive in a few days in Europe, which set some very ambitious target for decarbonized buildings. And of course, this is correct. In this directive is written that we can exempt historical building from energy efficiency target. I believe it is wrong, because also where we have the possibility to change, maybe the parameters could be different, but from 0 to 100, there are also 50 is good. Huh? So we have to apply. We cannot use the same parameters for the new construction or to the old one, and specific support should be given from national and municipality. They can do what they can, and in Venice we are thinking about this. However, there is an urgent need of new appropriate international standard, I would say here, because we need to have an international standard which can comply with historical buildings. And so in this way, we can also protect from any risks. The fires, example, unfortunately, that we had recently, say that the materials and design choices should consider both aspects, safety and risk reduction and efficiency. I would say also that if it was possible in Venice, we have not so many cases, but we did it, can be replicated anywhere. In some sense, we made it in the impossible city, we made it possible also as you see. So, because Venice, I would say, is the oldest city of the future. And maybe we can learn, we can teach something to the world also in this particular issue. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. A very, very clear message. And also a very long time ago that I've seen, trained as an architect, a 1 to 5 section of a facade at an international conference. So thanks for being technical and specific. So also welcome to Carlos Limongi. I give you still a little bit of a break. I'll first go to Andy Deacon before I go to you, so you can kind of take note of the discussion. I want to introduce Andy Deacon, who's not here at the picture. He was supposed to be in the second panel, but thank you for stepping in. Who is Managing Director of GCOM, Cities Network. And can you say something about your role as a Cities Network and how you deal with national and municipal collaboration issues in decarbonizing buildings and how you can support?
Yeah, great. Thank you, Rohir, and good morning, colleagues. Delighted to be able to say a few words on behalf of the 13,000 cities represented in the Global Covenant of Mayors Network. All of whom have committed to go at least as far as their national governments in cutting emissions, but close to 3/4 of them are now committed to deeper levels of emissions reduction. And buildings play an important role in enabling them to achieve those targets. So as a global network trying to bridge between local, national, and international or global initiatives, then we play that key bridging role. But so much of our experience relies on strong local leadership. And there are key opportunities to provide tools, data, and to support action planning. And so, for example, just last year, we worked jointly with Arup to produce an energy access and energy poverty toolkit. And in all of this work around renovation, let's not forget those who are least well off and sometimes marginalized, living in poor quality housing, but sometimes with very high energy consumption, very leaky buildings. And we need to be able to address that sector of the building stock and to bring people along on that journey with us as well. It's also important to be able to move projects forward from those action plans to become investable propositions. And we play a key role in opening up access to financing, including working with the mayor of Kloto 1, also in Togo, who is chair of the Regional Mayors Forum for Sub-Saharan Africa, and facilitating access to low-cost capital, helping to pool and bundle these financing opportunities is an important step. And we were very pleased at COP28 to sign a memorandum of understanding with the World Bank SIF team, who are here in the room, to try to open up routes to bring lower cost finance to cities. Doing that at scale is becoming increasingly important. And again, at COP28, 72 national governments, as Rohir mentioned in his opening remarks, committed to the Coalition for High Ambition Multilevel Partnerships Initiative, or CHAMP. And that encourages national governments to consult more fully with subnational leaders. And we, along with many other city network partners working through the local government and municipal authority constituency to the UNFCCC, or the LGMA, are then looking to bring support online to help those countries that have committed to the CHAMP initiative to deliver on that pledge to integrate subnational considerations into the next NDCs and to try to get us back on track. You heard about the global stocktake this morning, to be in line with the Paris Agreement. There are also opportunities, obviously, for networks like ours, but many others, to provide capacity building support and training. And one of the things that we're now partnering with C40 Cities on is a CFO network to get local government chief financial officers also engaged in thinking about financing and funding for sustainability projects. We know that there's still siloed thinking within local governments, but by bringing together or integrating CFOs, then projects that would otherwise get stuck in the sustainability team can find a champion also who's willing to advance and perhaps take different innovative financing approaches to get those things moving. All networks are strong believers in peer-to-peer learning. We have a fantastic mayoral board of around a dozen mayors, and they very much enjoy sharing not only their experiences of success, but also the barriers that they're encountering and the struggles that they're facing. But there is a role for that peer-to-peer learning. And for example, the mayor of Guelph in Canada has led on the development of a greener homes program, offering interest-free loans for home renovation, and has been very keen to share that example with other members of our global board. We also want to support those who want to advance more rapidly. There are a group of cities within Europe that have made a commitment to climate neutrality through a Net Zero Cities mission, and there is now a global urban transitions mission as part of Mission Innovation, with a growing global innovation alliance of partners who are being put in place to support that activity. And we now have 97 cities on board with that in very different parts of the world and from very different circumstances. But we've surveyed them all, and both energy use and the importance of buildings have come through strongly as sectors that need to be addressed. And we're trying to cluster and bring together some support to help them more rapidly advance along that journey. In closing, Raya, I'd say that mutual trust and cooperation between various levels of government is absolutely essential. And cities must be recognised as key partners in implementing an inclusive clean energy transition. They should be given access to sufficient funding and capacity to enable them to advance along that journey. And that's really the only way to develop a truly inclusive and just energy transition and to fulfill the goals of the Paris Agreement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andy. Thank you. And on your last point, mutual trust is absolutely key. You know, we have policy, we have enforcement, but what are all other forms of kind of actually moving fast together with cohorts of cities in a country? Thanks for laying that out and what you're doing with GCOM and on the CHAMP initiative. Carlos, welcome. Great that you're here. Carlos Limongi is the municipal procurator from San Borondon in Ecuador. And I'm very keen, and we're very keen to hear you, what kind of strategies have proven effective in your place for decarbonizing buildings, actually.
Thank you for having me. Good morning to everyone. In order to answer your question, first I want to give a little bit of context about San Borondon.
Very good.
We are a bit small city, 120,000 inhabitants. We have two geometrically opposite realities living in our city. The first one is the rural area with a lot of agriculture, and the other one, besides 10.5 kilometers, we have the largest and most upscale real estate development with luxury housing, with about 180 new luxury housing projects. So several intangibles of San Borondon have become the main reason why a lot of people in the adjacent areas are coming to live in our city. That's the infrastructure amongst the use of alternative means of transportation, security, amongst the infrastructure of commerce, education, and health. So we're experimenting a fast-growing housing development, real estate development. So in this context, and aware of the damage that can cause to the environment, these housing developments, Mayor Younes is our mayor of our city, developed the San Borondon 2030 initiative. So the main goal of this initiative is to be the first carbon neutral city in our country. We don't have any carbon neutral cities in Ecuador, so we are going ahead of that. Now, we are aware. We have a small budget. You know, we're in a small country in South America. We don't have any large means of financial subsidies to the people. So what do we have is the power to ameliorate and facilitate the risk that the privates take when they decide to invest in our city. So with that in mind, combined with the social concept and environmental perspective that characterizes San Borondon, that was the ideal combination to launch a city law that comes with initiatives of infrastructure and tax exemptions to the privates that decide to invest and trust in our city. So the most important objectives of this city law, that was our main I'm sorry, my English is not very good looking, so.
Don't worry, your English is perfect.
So the issues of this city law is aimed to create a special regime policy with both tax and infrastructure incentives for those builders who embrace the concept of sustainability buildings. We're aware that the best way that we have as a public institutions to help development our cities is to facilitate and reduce the risk that the private sector runs when it decides to invest in our city. That combined, as I said, with the social and environmental perspective that characterizes San Borondon administration, were the ideal combination to generate this law. So the most important objectives of this law are: first, promote the incorporation of green roofs and facades, incorporate new technologies that minimize the environmental impact, use of recycled materials, promote the use of clean energy to build a culture of energy sustainability, and take advantage of a natural landscape and resources that the city has. So, in order to get there, we have a lot of incentives. We can highlight the increase in construction density, flexibility in land uses, both commercial and institutional use, bonus in height of buildings up to 3 additional floors, depending on the project, expansion in the maximum occupation area per building. In our country, these types of initiatives are virgin, and these concepts, regrettably, have not been fully socialized. So our intention is to generate a culture of sustainability and respect for the environment through the public policy contained in the San Borondon 2030 initiative. These spaces like this forum, these 2 days, will help us gather many experiences from countries and cities that have this more advanced concept and be able to mimic its application to achieve our greatest objectives, to be a carbon neutral city. Thank you.
Wow, thank you very much. Your English and your message is crisp and clear. So, and I think this idea of city law that you introduce here, actually, and you touched upon kind of crucial elements like land use, energy efficiency, and how you kind of include kind of new technologies into the building and built environment. So, thank you for laying that out. We have another panel, but before this panel leaves, I want you to rise, gives the opportunity for a picture and for a warm applause. So, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you all for your comments. We're moving on to the second panel, transport and tourism. How do you think that kind of national resources or initiatives actually can complement local efforts in decarbonizing buildings?
Bonjour. Thank you, Roger, for your kind introduction. I'm Sasaki Shunichi from Japan. I'm so happy to have this opportunity explaining Japanese policy about decarbonizing building. Now, I'd like to talk about national initiative for local government. I think that commitment of local government is necessary for creating decarbonizing social. But every local social has each circumstances, as there is each culture, each climate, each geography, so on. I think national initiative need to fit with or need to be adjusted with each local circumstances. Japan aims to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions by 46% in 2030, 2030, compared to its 2013, 2013 levels, which is aligned with the long-term goal of achieving net zero by 2050. For the building sector, we set a new goal in line with these national goals. It has two components. First goal is that all newly constructed houses and buildings fit with the level of net zero energy by 2030. And second goal is that all houses and buildings stock in Japan is over the level of net zero energy by 2050. For these goals, the national government takes the lead in developing measurement. In order to strongly promote actions towards these goals, all new residential and non-residential buildings will be required to comply with the energy efficient standards from April 2025. On the other hand, the local governments implement these regulations as well as advance additional measures as necessary, depending on each local circumstances. Furthermore, as the local government are close to local communities and building owners, they play a crucial role in implementing energy efficiency and decarbonization policies, such as providing subsidies for energy-saving renovations, raising awareness of decarbonization and energy efficiency for buildings. In order to promote this effort of local governments, the national government provides the local government with financial and technical support, including sharing information on the best practices. I'd like to emphasize, it is so important to take care of diversity of regions. So we need to adjust our initiatives and share information on other local initiatives for their measurements. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for sharing that with us. And we will move on to the next speaker.
I would like to thank all the organizers of this panel discussion and colleagues who participate here, giving this good opportunity to share the experience and get new knowledge for implementation in our countries. I would like to emphasize that Armenia, being a country having lack of land resources and fossil fuel, and also having a big amount of overtime housing stock constructed in over 50 years ago, the possibility of keeping energy efficiency via renewable energy implementation programs is crucial and is a great challenge for the country. So that's why the efforts in decarbonizing buildings are among the priorities of the country. And this is inside the government decision to make support programs for energy efficient renovation of apartments and individual residential houses, which have been approved, giving different classification for different locations of the updated or new constructed buildings, because the country is utilized very unevenly. In order to have balanced, sustainable urban structure for the country, we need to have the central, local locations decentralized to the neighborhoods, to the suburbs, having equal conditions and opportunities for having energy efficiency and decarbonization for the buildings. What about the different stakeholders? Here we see that it is something to have national government and the implementation, because Armenia had approved the decentralization of government to places. All the ideas, all the legislation approved by the central government is being implemented into places by the actors of local authorities. So different stakeholders as local authorities are responsible as well for the finalization of buildings, buildings with energy efficiency retrofitting or new constructions, both for public and residential buildings. So they are the responsible body giving the final phase for the implementation of the project, as was the legislation worked out by the government and dedicated to energy efficiency of buildings, having the following structure: the law on energy saving and renewable energy, which stipulates the designers, developers, and operators comply with mandatory technical requirements for energy saving and efficiency in newly constructed multi-apartment buildings, as well in facilities being built and expense the state funds. Resolutions, also construction norms, which include building climatology, thermal protection of buildings, artificial and natural lighting, the standards, consulting manuals, which are being implemented by the local authorities. So the different stakeholders have their own participation in the neighborhood development projects, being different parts, different components of the same chain. Thanks.
Thank you very much for laying this out. And how you support, I mean, governments and especially the decentralization efforts that you've made. I think is a very important point there. Let's move on to the next speaker. And this was the question that I kind of formally posed. Ms. Sandes Beji Kayem from the Ministry of Equipment and Housing of Tunisia. I mean,
I'm here as a president of the Committee of Sustainable Construction. And I'm also the Director General of Housing. So our work is into the committee. So I will explain how is it. So Ministry of Equipment and Housing is in charge of public works in Tunisia. Following Tunisia's commitment to the Paris Agreement strategies and work, and the various ministries have put in place principally the strategy of energy transition. Other ministries, by the Ministry of Industry, Mines and Energy, including different programs to reduce the use of energy and to use renewable energies in different sectors as transport, construction. And by another side, the ecological transition was put in by the Ministry of the Environment, working with all ministries. That's why our ministry is, who is in charge of public works, so it is divided. The construction is related, like said Aziza, is divided between the three ministries. Many actions were undertaken by the private sector long before, and at the level of the Ministry of Equipment, we have put in place the creation of ecological neighborhoods, prepared decrees for the thermal regulation of buildings, texts for the collection of water in buildings, as well as specifications that encourage sustainability in buildings. So in addition to all this work, a sustainable construction committee was set up in the ministry, in the building, public buildings direction, so which brings together the initiatives of the various players in the building sector to promote sustainable construction. So we did that by developing local green materials and putting on regulations in order to use them. We encourage the use of recycled materials by adapting laws to them and ensure the local workforce training. We implement waste management in building projects in the procurement. And we push designers and contractors to work on the SDG. Also, we are partner with all the NGO and the associations. We participate to network to their networking, and we set up. We are also present in their setup of construction Tunisian green building cluster.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for laying this out. I think we are now moving from kind of a more international perspective to you, Mandy or Amanda. You work with Habitat for Humanity International. So how do you engage in this kind of multi-level partnerships to drive building decarbonization? What potential do you see there?
Thanks, Rohir. It's a pleasure to be here with this esteemed panel and the panel before us. Thank you for having us. Thanks, Rohir. I'm with Habitat for Humanity International, which is a international nonprofit housing organization. We work in about 70 countries around the world across low-income, high-income developing contexts. In the United States, for example, we have about 1,000 locations where we are building affordable housing, in addition to the 70 countries where we work around the world. So we take a people-centered approach. As the representative of civil society on this panel today, I wanted to stress that that's a really important approach to take. Who are the people that we seek to serve as national governments, local governments, and civil society? People. Where do people live? They live in houses. Housing is a unique platform for achieving decarbonization and adaptation, which is a critical component of the story that we're telling today. We really work at the intersection of family need, construction, the housing value chain, government, private sector, to address the barriers to adequate and affordable housing for all. The majority of buildings in the world are housing, and it's frequently overlooked as an opportunity to achieve many of the goals that we seek collectively. In countries around the world, like I just was speaking recently with colleagues and friends in Haiti, Malawi, and Peru, we work at the very local level at the crossroads of people and policymakers. Through our programs, we engage directly with local authorities. We act as a facilitator with communities and help guide recommendations from communities, collected from communities based on the needs that they have identified for themselves to policymakers and utilities. We see three real priorities that we know are also on the mind of local authorities. We recognize the urgent need to prioritize adaptation for the most vulnerable. This can only be done with the genuine understanding of hazards. Hazards are local. How do you identify hazards? By engaging with communities who experience those hazards. Habitat utilizes a specific methodology called PASA, Participatory Approach to Safe Shelter Awareness, which is a series of workshops and engagement with communities that engage local authorities and utilities as well to identify the local hazards specifically to shelter across all types of shelter, inadequate housing in slums and informal settlements to high-income housing as well. Another component that we're really seeing as a tension right now is ensuring mitigation does not drive up the cost of housing. Affordability, we have a global housing crisis. There are more houses needed, adequate houses needed than are available. So while mitigation and improving codes are essential, and we support that obviously, we have to address the fact that it can drive up affordability. This is something we're experiencing at the very local level in the United States right now. But when it's done correctly, it can really be an effective means of addressing energy poverty. We had a specific program called the Residential Energy Efficiency for Low-Income Housing Program in Armenia and in Bosnia-Herzegovina, where we worked as a convener of all stakeholders, local government, financial authorities, utilities, and we helped to establish homeowner associations who actually engaged with all stakeholders to renovate the buildings themselves and to own that process for the long-term success of that engagement. Finally, I think one thing that we sometimes overlook, especially for individuals in slums and informal settlements, is the opportunity that we have to look at processes like slum upgrading to achieve incremental decarbonization and resilience. We released a report at COP28 where we tried to capture some of the more incremental approaches to introducing greener technology to address things like flooding, heat, and access to sanitation while increasing renewable fuel sources. So, for example, like biogas digesters at small scale, or painting roofing white to reduce internal heat temperatures. Incremental solutions are small, but en masse they can be big. So if we can enable that from local authorities to communities themselves through education, subsidies, facilitating understanding of these issues, it could be really transformational. So I will end there, but thank you so much.
Thank you very much. We heard so many things and so many kind of practical solutions actually to drive decarbonization of buildings forward. And we're doing very good on time. I just wanted to spot and to see in the audience, are there any questions from your sides to the panel? Some burning questions, some ideas that you want to share?
Thank you. My name is Riyad, I'm with Guidehouse Germany, which is a private consultancy. My question is heading to the latest speaker. Thank you for your intervention. The question is, how do you select the countries you work in?
How do we select?
The country, yeah.
Well, it's complicated, but we've been, Habitat for Humanity has existed for about 50 years, 1976. Some of those contexts are historical and some provide opportunity for engagement. So sometimes it's luck and history, and sometimes there are specific opportunities that present themselves for identifying perhaps new opportunities for housing finance or specific populations that we seek to serve. So, but we can talk more after.
It's complicated. Any other question? Yes, please. Let's address also a question to our guests from Japan, Armenia, and Tunisia.
Thank you. Scott Francisco from Cities for Forests and Pilot Projects. It's a question, I guess, to the whole panel, and I'm particularly interested in the comments from Japan about national government support of local government. I'm wondering about the hiring of expertise in local government that can just really help cities really build the capacity internally. Because one thing that we see is that often, city governments are stretched. They've got all these new requirements coming in, and just to be able to deal with, say, embodied carbon, and that's the one that we're a little bit focused on, is overwhelming. But hiring someone, making a signal actually both to the market that this is a valuable career path for young people, as well as actually having the capacity internally, would just seem like a great strategy. And I don't know if that's the kind of thing that has been supported with that national government support of local governments, because money is would be one of the barriers, presumably, to being able to make those hires. Is there anyone that's dealt with that and has some examples on hiring a capacity for, in particular, carbon accounting, for example, in a local government?
National government in Japan assist local government with developing capability of local government various way. So if local government want to entries outside career, we support it. We can support it. Again, I emphasize decarbonization social creating is very important, but it's necessary for local governments, corporation. So we need to adjust and assist local government, local circumstances. We own way adjusted, need to be adjusted.
Thank you very much. And I think, that comes down to, I think, the crux of the whole discussion, how actually do national and local authorities work together and collaborate, and what financial resources and capacity and technical resources are there available. I know we are almost at time, so I just want to give the opportunity for you to thank the panel, and I want to ask the panel to rise. Thank you very much for your contribution. Opportunity for some pictures, yes, please. Thank you very much. Thank you. So we are coming to an end, but I don't do that before giving our esteemed colleagues from UN Habitat and UNEP the floor. Just one thing, I think the urgency, I think we are all aware of the urgency. We are all aware that we are not going fast enough. And the NDCs that countries have to deliver on in the next, let's say, 1.5 years are a crucial opportunity to build in more city-specific and more explicitly city collaboration, but also sector-specific on buildings, right? So the NDC trajectory and the NDC delivery that we see and that will be delivered by 2025 in COP30 is a key moment for us to accelerate action and to kind of strengthen, raise ambition and strengthen our targets in the building sector. I want to give the floor first to Leah Ronaldo from UN Habitat and then to Sharon Gill from UNEP. This was my role. I want to thank the French government and UN Environment for bringing these people together, right? It's a lot of work, so thank you very much. So big applause for these two powerhouses.
Well, first of all, let me thank you all for showing up. It's a real pleasure to have the city's community in a buildings discussion, in the buildings forum. It doesn't happen very often, and so we really appreciate that this whole community is here. And I want to acknowledge my colleague Georgia, who's been the powerhouse and Marie from UN Habitat, who have really been the real powerhouses behind the organization of these events. So we have heard that cities have a key role to play in the run for decarbonization. Yes, many challenges need to be tackled. We've heard all the challenges, and I know everybody here is up for that challenge, so I'm very grateful for that. There are technical capacities, and there's also a little bit of politics that needs to be dealt with. And we city folks are very good at that, so we can navigate how things need to happen. In addition, often knowledge and best practices do not reach the local level. Some key takeaways from the first panel. Mubarak spoke on the question and importance of equity. We talk about buildings, but very often we forget that people are at the heart of the matter. Pier Paolo in Venice told us that if it's possible in Venice, it's possible anywhere in the world. So let us learn from the complex cities where these situations can be solved. Andy of GCOM spoke about bridging local leadership and national policy, bringing in the people that are not usually in our conversations, the CFOs. We really want to talk to our finance folks. We talk a lot about the environment folks, but maybe we need to talk more about the people who hold the budget. Samborondon, Carla spoke about high ambition and political leadership in Samborondon that has engaged private sector through strong policy levers. I think we have some key takeaways here that need to be brought to fore. Leah?
Thanks, Sharon. Also from my side, massive thank you to all the speakers. It was really interesting to hear all these different perspectives. And also, I am so happy to see such a full room of people interested in local governments and the role in building decarbonization, because we all know it's going to be, we have a rising population growth, rising urbanization, and most of the buildings standing in 2050 have not been built yet. And where are most buildings? In and around cities. So this importance and this interest of all of you in the link between local governments and building decarbonization is so fantastic to see. But apart from that, let me reflect a little bit also on the panel. I want to highlight, Andy did also speak about CHAMP and the 72 countries that have endorsed CHAMP and said, we want to work more with our local governments, including in the NDC revision. And I want to make one remark there is we did a small analysis of these countries. And actually from the 72, more than 50 of these countries, so more than 2/3, actually in their last NDCs, in their current NDCs, only have low or moderate urban content. So that means they only marginally or a little bit refer to the importance of cities and to city priorities. Massive opportunity to think about 2025 and the NDC revision process. We've heard in the second panel the importance of sharing information, sharing data, that policies need to be addressed and tailored to the local context, importance of energy efficiency, and what can also be done specifically when there's new buildings being built, importance of holistic approaches. Buildings are not an island. Buildings are connected to the urban fabric. We need to ensure that we think about this in a holistic way, including on waste management. And then the people-centered approach. We need to make sure that the buildings that we build today and in the future will still be affordable, that they're sustainable and affordable. We're still living through an energy crisis, so we need to make sure that we're leaving no one in no building behind. With that, back to Sharon. We're doing a little bit of a double act here. So we don't want to confuse with the slides, but...
Yeah, so the good news is we have a plan. I recall when I was early in my career, I was a little bit a slave in an architectural firm. I think many of you can relate to long nights, et cetera, et cetera. And as a planner, my work was very distinct from the buildings folks, from the people planning the buildings. So we need to bring these two conversations together. And I'm very excited to say that with this session, we have a concrete plan and call for action and a proposal for a way forward. We want to create a global engagement mechanism and platform for local and subnational governments and other stakeholders to facilitate exchange and experiences of best practice on building decarbonization in an equitable and inclusive way. Pause here. This, we hope, can be embedded in the global ABC and SURGE initiatives using tools such as sustainable procurement and urban planning policies. So that's a lot. Our English teacher's nightmare paragraph, but there's a lot of substance there that hopefully will bring the city community, the urban community, into action for the building sector. Back to you, Leah.
And no action plan without concrete next steps. Otherwise, we want to make sure that this gets anchored. So we are hoping to have an exploratory meeting on this topic in April. So an open invitation to share your ideas, thoughts, and inputs there. And we want to ensure that this event this morning, as well as this local leaders roundtable, that's going to happen in the afternoon, collectively inform our thinking and the roadmap for 2024. I think we all know that 2024 is an exciting year. To everybody who I've talked to said it's already starting super intense in the beginning of 2024, and it's going to continue that way. And we want to make sure to keep that momentum up. Is we have a strong engagement pathway from first that exploratory meeting, but then also several anchor points, including, of course, the SBs in Bonn, the Innovate for Cities conference in Montreal, the World Urban Forum in Cairo, and then COP29 in Baku later this year, where we hope to be able to take stock and see where have we made progress, where do we need to focus our energies on, and then really ensuring that we're on the right track, because we know that COP30 is also around the corner. COP30 will have a strong urban focus as well, and of course the NDC revision will be due by that point, so we're hoping that by COP30 we can take stock and hopefully can say we have more urban content in the NDCs, stronger thinking around local governments and building decarbonization. And with that, thank you all so much, and looking forward to engaging with you throughout this forum.
And thank you to Roger for the wonderful moderation.
Fantastic. That was fun.
I'm from China.
Yes. Fantastic.
Do you know Rong Yang?
Yes, I do.
Yes.
We're sitting in the same office.
We were together 5 years ago.
Oh, great.
I was based there